If it takes 3 people 3 hours to paint 3 walls, how many people does it take to paint 9 walls in 9 hours? Well, after a quick pause, most of us come to the right answer, which is still 3 people.
Well, duh.
But it's actually that momentary pause that I want to talk to you about in this video. Because there's something really interesting happening in the human brain when you stop and pause and think like that. And it turns out that ChatGPT kind of works the same way. Like, it can accidentally quickly spit out an answer like 9 people. But then if you say, walk me through why you came to 9 people step by step, it will eventually say, oh, sorry, I'm wrong, the answer's 3. Like, think of how human that is. Scientists are now figuring out why that is and how they can apply it to ChatGPT for better results. And along the way, we might be learning something about how the human brain works too. So get ready to take a long, hard look at yourself in the mirror, because in this video, we're gonna be talking about self-reflection applied to artificial intelligence. So let's start by learning about a chain of thought mechanism called SmartGPT. Fellow YouTuber AI Explained created something called SmartGPT, which is like our good friend ChatGPT, but it gets to think a bit deeper about its answers. So in his video, he uses actual benchmarks that test how much smarter ChatGPT gets when you ask it in different ways to reflect on its own answer, to think step by step. But it's also a useful way to gain insight into how these LLMs actually see society. Imagine that you ask ChatGPT a question like this: why can't a broken promise be put back together? IRL, this answer is different for everybody. It depends on their personal experiences and their ideas of what love is. And a person's answer on this is more of a reflection of their loyalty and how their friendships are laid out. By re-prompting its answer, saying, why did you come to this conclusion? Why do you think this way? It actually activates different parts of its neural network and gives us more insight into how the model works. So if you want to know the secret technique to unlock the full potential of ChatGPT, here it is. So there's this interesting scientific paper that just came out about something called chain of thought prompting. And it's all about making our AI buddies like ChatGPT that much smarter with their replies. The researchers tried all sorts of different self-reflection prompts. And the questions came from all sorts of different genres, like science, medicine, and more. And they found one prompt that works the best, works like magic. Ready for it? Quote, let's work this out in a step-by-step way to be sure that we have the right answer, unquote. So that exact prompt is what you need, but you can't just tack it on to your first query. You have to wait for the reply and then run it back in again. Now, why this exact prompt is still somewhat unknown, but by just trying different self-reflective prompts, this one scored the highest. So one tool that we could use to dive into why this might be working is called theory of mind. So you obviously know these large language models like ChatGPT are pretty impressive, but they still struggle a bit when it comes to understanding our thoughts, our feelings, and our internal states. So this kind of understanding is called theory of mind. And if you're wondering if something like ChatGPT is more like just a fancy calculator, or is it more like a human mind that has a real understanding of who you are when you're prompting it and where it is in the world, the good news is researchers have a test for this. It's called the theory of mind test. When you run the test, it's a sliding scale from 0 to 1, and you're prompting the system to self-reflect in some way on what its output was. And depending on the prompt, ChatGPT ends up on all sorts of parts of that spectrum. But there are times when ChatGPT's output will actually approach 100% accuracy, meaning it does seem to have a theory of mind, just like us. So when it comes to theory of mind, ChatGPT is actually about where a 9-year-old kid would be. So in this new study, these researchers argue that ChatGPT has the theory of mind of about a 9-year-old kid. Theory of mind is something that allows one person to imagine what's going on in the other's head, even if it's different from our own thoughts, needs, wants, emotions, feelings. And the skill has been super important in the evolution of human history. And it's still important for our everyday interactions, for companies that run smoothly, for relationships. Now, a Stanford professor has been testing ChatGPT for these same skills, trying to find out if it could understand unobservable mental states, like beliefs and desires, and the AI performed impressively well, 93% in fact, which is significantly better than some of the similar models from Meta and Google's DeepMind. So now we're kind of just like caught wondering, like, does ChatGPT actually have a theory of mind? Or is it just getting so good at mimicking human language that it feels like it does? So now I want to tell you about a killer update that's on its way for ChatGPT, but first we need to demystify tokens. So in the ChatGPT world, there's this thing that's called a token, which for simplicity you can think of as a single word, but it actually could be a single letter, a word, or a phrase. But they work like individual words because they're building blocks that go into something bigger, like how words can make a sentence and a paragraph in a book. And right now, chatbots have a limit of how many of these tokens they can process at once, meaning you can't put in super long pieces of text. For example, right now, ChatGPT, using the GPT-4 engine, can only manage an input of 8,000 tokens, which is why you can't feed in the entire 76,944 word long original Harry Potter book. But guess what? OpenAI is testing a new GPT-4 32K token model, which means soon we can double the amount of input text into a chat. Now, some lucky folks have already gotten access to play with this 32K model from the OpenAI API. But for the rest of us, we're waiting, but it's coming soon. All right, so if you thought 32K tokens was insane, what if I told you there's a new model that just came out that's not ChatGPT and it's open source and it can handle 65K?
Damn!
So guess what? The open source community has done it again. They've come up with a new large language model that's like ChatGPT, but it can handle so much more text. This new model can handle 64,000 tokens, whereas the current ChatGPT can only handle 8,000. So now you're kind of in the territory where you might be able to paste in your entire textbook to ask a question. Introducing the MosaicML MPT-7B Storywriter 65K+. This is both a powerful and commercially open sourced model. So that jargony title might have come off a little mysterious, so let me break it down for you. MosaicML is a for-profit company. Now the MPT-7B refers to the 7 billion parameters that it was trained with. Essentially how big its brain is, its neural network. Storywriter means that the base model was actually fine-tuned to create stories. And the 65K+ refers to the token size, meaning you can dump a lot of text into it. In fact, this model was trained on a whopping 1 trillion tokens, and surprisingly only cost about $200,000 to train, which I know is a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of it, for this kind of a model, that's pretty cheap. So another little jargony thing you might hear about to improve a model's output is called 0, 1, or few-shot learning. So imagine somebody asks you a question, but first they show you an example of what they want your answer to be like, a framework you could think of it as. That would help your brain sort of focus in on what it needs to think about, what it needs to do, and the kind of output you need to produce. Well, that's all they're doing with ChatGPT when you hear people technically talking about 0, 1, or few-shot prompting. For example, if you want to ask ChatGPT for a recipe, you might prompt it with something like, here's a recipe that I like, can you make a vegetarian version of it? So that's technically called a one-shot prompt, and it just gives it an example and it helps ChatGPT know what you want. And a few-shot prompt would just be multiple recipes, few examples. Now, wouldn't it make more sense if it was just called example prompting? So now I want to kick it up a notch and talk about an entirely new framework to put around ChatGPT called DERA. So there's this new framework called DERA, and it improves the ChatGPT output significantly. So in DERA, you're basically taking two different versions of ChatGPT and having them talk to each other. In the research paper, they refer to this as the two agents. One acts as the researcher. It finds and selects information and presents it. And the second one's a decider, looking through all of that output, deciding which order to rank them in, and presenting the final output. And this model significantly helps with hallucinations, when it basically makes things up. It also helps with omissions, when it just doesn't include important information in the output. And on top of that, you get some of the benefits of chain of thought reasoning and self-reflection. So in the future, thought leaders like AI Explain think that all output from models like this is going to go through the ringer, meaning lots of little agents will contribute and organize almost like a whole council of experts. Each time you prompt ChatGPT, it'll be like having Einstein and Socrates, Marie Curie, Alan Turing, and Steve Jobs all helping you check your work. Dude, your homework is going to be on a whole nother level. Smash that subscribe button.